handle the truth.
What is going on, everybody? What is going on? Welcome back. Saturday Night Cell Block. How's everybody doing? I pray that everybody is blessed, safe, and sound. Your bellies are full, and that you guys are comfortable, man. We got a great show tonight. Great show. So, I have a dear friend of mine, very good friend that I just recently met, that is getting him a nice cup of coffee for this story that he's going to sit down and fill us with, man. We got a great story tonight. So this gentleman's name is Chuck Keech. Chuck Keech spent a little bit of time incarcerated. I'm gonna let Mr. Keech get into all of that, but today's discussion is essentially going to be Mr. Keech's life, what he's had going on with his life, what he's doing now, and the fact that he's sitting here in this chair with us. So go ahead and introduce yourself, good sir.
Well, thank you, Thomas. First of all, I want to say thank you for having me on your show this evening.
Absolutely. Thank you for blessing
And I want to thank everybody out there for logging in and watching the show this evening. My name is Chuck Keech. I recently turned 57 years old. So 40 years ago, 1983, Jacksonville, Florida, I got involved in a burglary with 3 other individuals. 2 of those individuals killed 2 people, stabbed them to death. And because I was involved in that crime, the law in the state of Florida, it's called felony murder, made me just as guilty as them. I was facing the death penalty at the age of 17. Later on, they offered me a deal, and I took 2 mandatory 25-year-to-life sentences to get out from under that. And I spent 38 years in prison. I've been out a little over a year and a half now, and life's never been better.
I know that's right. So 38 years in prison. So this is the discussion. We're just going to break that down. I've had several shows on felony murder. So for my listeners from the beginning, felony murder is not new to you. For those that it is new to, felony murder is an issue. And we're going to explain why it's an issue, but there are many individuals who are stuck in prison under many different scenarios because of felony murder. And you have several states that apply felony murder. Florida is one of them. Michigan is another. So in the case of DeMel Dukes up there, felony murder. And with his case, the trigger man was 17 years old, right? And DeMel was 18 years old. Well, the trigger man got out of prison. The actual murderer got out of prison because he was charged as a juvenile.
Right.
Well, DeMel Dukes was in the back room. Same thing. It was a store robbery. Trigger man killed the store man. Right. And DeMel was in the back, got caught for felony murder. So he's still in prison while the actual murder is home.
Well, see, the state of Florida's law is actually completely opposite, because when they charge you with felony murder, even though you're a juvenile, the law allows them to automatically adjudicate you without a hearing, okay? To charge a juvenile with an adult crime, normally you have to give them an adjudication hearing.
Right.
All the evidence has to be brought up, and then you wait for the judge to make a decision on whether you'll be charged as a juvenile or charged as an adult. With the Florida statute 78204, it automatically allows them to circumvent that and just automatically charge you with first-degree murder. Once they do that, you're adjudicated. It's one of those things that I studied right off the bat, once I went to prison, because, as everybody wants to,
Did you get him?
No, I didn't get him. He flew.
I'm
Man, that sucker, he's good.
I've been trying to catch
very
him
elusive
all day. So, I mean,
he'll drive you nuts, too.
It's probably
made me feel like I was back in the cell block again, chasing gnats.
You know what I think that I always think that it's a deceased relative, man. Somebody from down the line.
Yeah, you aggravated them, and they're here to aggravate you back.
They're just playing with me. They're laughing at me or whatever.
Right.
That's I like to think that. But so let's get into that night, man. Let's get into, because there's a lot of parents out there mine included, who has children that went wayward, and that happened to
Mm-hmm.
be my thing as a child, was B&Es. I was breaking
Right.
into people's
Sure.
houses at 12, 13, 14 years old. Well, 13, 14, breaking into people's houses and stealing their things, regardless if people were home or not. That wasn't a thought of mine. I was just going into people's houses. So
No. Well, you're a little bolder than I was. Like that night with that burglary was because I was with those three guys. Um, One of them had the key to the house because he knew the people at the house. Um, they even called ahead of time to make sure they were going to bed before we went into the house. So, in one sense of the essence of things, I was more guilty than some of the guys, say like Eddie, okay, or my friend Taylor, who was just in a car when a dope deal went bad and a guy got shot in the head on their way out. Okay, he didn't know anything about it, but still ended up with a mandatory quarter life sentence. He was like, I think he was 18 when he caught his. He did like 28 years on his. He's out and doing really good now. But the thing is, they don't, or at least they didn't differentiate when it came to that law. Okay, there was a stretch of time it almost became political. That the prison system in Florida, if you looked at it, the majority of the life sentences that were given out to black guys.
mm-hmm.
So they went on this run back in the 80s. Anybody that didn't have any influence, white guys, if you went up and you got charged like this, you were going to prison. Okay, and they really loaded it up. I mean, I met a lot of guys, and I know a lot of guys from just before the time I came in to the time I came in, and all those years that I did, that fell in that same circumstance. And it didn't matter what you did. My own lawyer, when I met him for the first time, I was a juvenile in juvenile detention at what they called the P Farm in Jacksonville because they had to keep us separate from the adults. The first time I met him, I went into this room, I sat down, and he said, "Hi, my name is so-and-so." I won't mention his name because he's a judge now. But he turned a piece of paper around on the table and slid it over to me. And he says, I don't know how free we can be with what we say on the show, but
I just wouldn't say anything that could incriminate you.
No. Basically, what he did.
If we're going to be talking about anybody else,
I'm talking about like cussing at a low level.
Oh, I mean, however, man,
okay.
Listen.
So basically, he turned this piece of paper around, slid it across the table for me, set a pen down in front of me, and he said, "You need to sign that, or they're going to fry your ass." This is what my lawyer told me right off the bat, and I'm like. Now, in my mind, I'm thinking I didn't kill anybody.
And you're 17.
Yeah.
And was your parents with you?
Okay, so I grew up on the streets in Rochester, New York. My mother married my stepfather. There was 9 of us kids. I was the 8th of 9. So I've basically seen that a lot of the stuff that I did growing up, I was doing to get attention because I wasn't getting it at home.
Right.
And I met my biological father for the first and only time when I was about 5, and then he passed away the next year. My mother, her way of trying to fix the situation was to push me at my stepfather. I remember her going like, "Okay, here, Chucky, kiss your dad goodnight," and handing me to my stepfather, okay? And in my mind, I'm thinking, you're not my dad.
Right.
My dad's dead. I didn't know how to articulate those kind of things. We weren't taught in my family to express your feelings, your emotions, your thoughts, and things of that nature. You were to do what you were told to do, shut up, be seen and not heard. So that kind of started me off on this path. I started running away from home at an early age, stealing out of stores. I used to hang out with a lot of hippies and ex-Vietnam vets. Man, when I was 8, 9 years old, so like I was a full-blown into smoking pot, drinking beer and stuff like that by the time I was 11 and hanging out on the streets. And my stepfather couldn't stand it. He basically kicked me out when I was 13. My mother had to give custody of me to the state of New York. I stayed in juvenile detention for Well, see, I went there March 13th of 1980, stayed 17 months and 9 days, went to a halfway house of theirs, didn't last a week, was back on the streets, got caught for an attempted burglary, sent back to Berkshire, was there about 8 more months, and then I took off again. And it was probably a little more than a year before I committed the crime I did when I came down to Jacksonville, trying to live with my mother. So we never really had this great relationship, okay?
Mm-hmm.
She tried. She tried so much, which kind of blew my mind, was that when her ex-husband Phil brought me down here with her, he had me show him a place in Rochester where he could buy weed at. So I showed him, and he bought weed. I didn't know he was bringing it down here, and then him and my mom were sitting on the couch rolling up a joint to smoke it, and then she passed it to me. You know, so she was trying.
Right.
I was too far gone by then. I didn't trust anybody or anything, man. You know, anybody that was an authority figure to me I just couldn't trust them.
And how old were you then?
I was still 16. I turned 17 there in Jacksonville. And then 3 months later, 3 months later was when we.
And what year was this?
1983.
1983 in Jacksonville.
Yeah.
That's a rough area then. That whole.
Oh, I was in the worst area of town.
That whole area. See, so the case that I'm working on, John Merritt, was up there at that time with the people that he was running with, kind of just doing the same thing up in the 5 Points area.
Yeah.
Is where he was from.
Yep.
And John Merritt, of course, is the guy that I'm advocating for now. So, okay, 1983, Jacksonville, 16 years old.
Yeah. Well, I just turned 17. I was trying to stay at my mom and him had a trailer with my sister Tammy and my brother David lived there with him. David was a year younger than me, Tammy a year older than me. I didn't have anything to do. It was like in the sticks. So I ended up meeting this girl named Beth Ann, followed her and her family into the city, was hanging out on the streets, but it wasn't anything like where I was from.
Mm.
Where I was from, I knew where I could go maybe get some dope, deliver something for somebody and get paid for it, hustle up some kind of money some way. I didn't know anything like that in Jacksonville. You know what I mean? So I went like 2-3 weeks.
And when you say dope, you mean?
Pot mostly.
Weed, yeah.
Like, you know, back then there was still acid. Some people would like, some of the dealers that I knew would send me like to the health food store, and I would buy those big bottles of the Pink Hearts or, you know, the footballs or whatever for them and bring it back to them. You know, it was kind of funny because you pay like, back then you were paying like $5.99 for a bottle of things that had 1,000 in them, and they were shooting them off for 50 cents a piece. But that's the kind of thing I was doing. And so there was like a 2-3 week stretch of time where I hardly had eaten anything. I was homesick. I mean, I was around people that cared nothing for me because I was from up north. You know, as far as they were concerned.
Yeah.
You know, I was this northerner that was
You're a tourist.
That's right. Okay. I'm impeding on their territory.
That's right.
And they treated me that way.
That's right.
So it wasn't anything for me that I met one of my co-defendants' friend David first, and he actually paid me a few bucks to do a couple odd jobs for him. And then I ended up meeting Donald through him. Then I met Eddie and Pat through him, through Donald. And then Pat and I hung out a little bit. Pat was the youngest of us. He was only 16. He was from Chillicothe, Ohio. He had run away and come down here, and he was living with Eddie. And basically one night he said, "Hey, man," he said, "I got the key to this house. We're going to do a burglary, blah, blah, blah." And I'm thinking, oh, that's it. That's my shot, you know? So I start talking to him about it. And he says, well, Eddie's got the final say in things. He said, basically, we're going to go and take a bunch of stuff and leave. I said, okay, well, I want to get in on it. I'm thinking if I can get $100, I can get a Greyhound bus ticket. I'm home.
Just looking to eat, and go home.
Right, yeah. Okay. So we all get together. He says yes. And then he makes this statement about, well, when we go in the house, we're going to kill these people. I'm locked in.
Why?
You know the code. You know what I mean? I done said I want to do this. Now, with my words, I done locked myself in. So instead of backtracking and saying, well, I don't know about that, and letting common sense rule the time, I went, oh, that ain't nothing. I can do that.
But why? Why did you feel that you were locked in? Because you gave your word.
Because that's just how I've always been. When I give my word about something, I do it. You know what I mean? It's kind of stupid. I got a few scars from doing that, a couple on my head and other things like that, because I said I would do something as stupid as it was and still went ahead and did it.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Time has taught me better, especially in prison, because you had to learn, you give your word in prison, you don't follow through with it, you're going to die. Simple as that.
How many times have you reflected and just wished that kid would have just, nah, I'm not in?
A million. I mean, how many times over 38 years was I sitting in my bunk at night talking to myself going, all you had to do was say no, you know, all I don't think I would have went and said something to somebody about it. You know what I mean? But, I've told myself, man, all you had to do was say was no. No, that doesn't make any sense. But because of my arrogance and my pride, I said yes. I said I can do that. So the next night, we all got in Eddie's car. We drove over to that part of town. I've since Googled it since I've been out. I found some articles on it. They call it Murder House. It's like,
Nobody about it.
no.
It's a dead,
No,
dead.
yeah. Anytime you pass by, that's what they call it. But we went in 2 by 2. Eddie and Pat went in first because they had the key. Me and Donald went in behind them. I guess part of me, the whole time I'm thinking this can't be real. You know what I mean? Because it's like surreal. I wouldn't put it as deep as like one of those movies where you see the dude like floating over the ground and
no, you're in the element.
possessed.
You know what's going on. You're in the element, but you're just hypersensitized. It's like time. There is no time.
It stood still. It was.
There is no time.
Like in the background, I'm hearing the traffic in the background, but I'm in a bubble.
Right. Yes.
And it's like not affecting me because my brain's trying to process this thing.
You're just,
And so we go in the house. We kind of get the lay of it.
And did you ever feel like they were just playing around, or did you know that they were serious?
No, see, that's the thing, right? When we went into the house, I still wasn't sure. It was like we were looking around and stuff, and I'm telling them, look, there's this stuff, man, we can grab this stuff, and boom, we can get out of here. And that's when Eddie turns around and he says, no, they got to die. He's the oldest of us. He was 19 at the time. And so he tells, once we understand that she's in this room up here in the front across from this other room, he's in the back end room, his brother and sister, they're older, 50 and 52. He tells Donald, you go watch the dude, stand outside the door in case anything happens. He tells Pat, go in the kitchen, get me a knife. Pat goes into the kitchen and he comes back and he's got this steak knife. And this is when it's really starting to hit because Eddie tells him, no, it's not big enough. You need to get a bigger knife. So Pat goes back into the kitchen and he comes back with a knife that's about this long. It's just a longer steak knife, but it doesn't have the edges that the shorter one has on it. And he hands it to Eddie. Eddie says, you go with Donald. Keep an eye on him. Chuck's coming with me. So he gets up and he starts towards her room. I'm like behind him. And like right when we get to the doorway, I happen to look down and there's a purse sitting by the door. So I pick up the purse and I go back to the living room because we got like a duffel bag with us. I turned back around and it was like froze. I just couldn't do anything. All I saw was Eddie's silhouette. It was like dark, but I could see the darker against the dark, I guess you could say. And it was like he was standing there like making these movements like he was unsure. And then he disappeared. He just like dropped. And then I heard the sounds of the struggling. And along with that, I mean,
So you think in that moment he was pumping himself up?
That's what he was doing. He was,
Adrenalizing himself.
kind of like me saying I would go along with it. Now he's saying to himself, I done said I'm going to do this. Now I got to do this. Okay. He found himself in the same position as I did with saying I would go along. Now he's in the position where he said, I have to do this. So I have to do this.
It's too late.
That's it.
You guys,
No turning back.
That's what I was just going to say. All you guys felt like there was no turning back.
No turning back. It's almost like once it got started, it was like a wrecking ball going down the hill. You weren't stopping it.
And all anybody had to do was just say, man, let's get out of here. So he went in the room.
Yeah. I was standing in the living room. The closest I can say is if you take a steak knife, my mom did this a couple of times with a cold chicken. She would set it up on the counter, and she would take the knife and she would like put it into it and start, and that same sound was what I was hearing. He stabbed her over 35 times, 36, 37 times.
That's a horrible sound.
And I heard every one of them. Every time he did that, it was like something left me.
What do you mean?
It's just, I don't know. It was like getting a blow to the head. I just got a little more deflated every time until.
You knew what those sounds were.
Yeah, he was taking her life. And I felt helpless to do anything about it.
And she wasn't screaming or.
I could hear her struggling. I know that he had put his hand over her mouth, and he was stabbing her in the throat, bro, and the upper chest region. I saw the reports. I never saw the bodies. I told him cover her with a sheet. I don't want to see it. I know I'd have nightmares for the rest of my life if I saw that. And it was like, I don't know, it seemed like forever, and he came out of the room, and he had blood all over him. He had the knife in his hand. And I said, the first thing that came to mind, I got to go. I can't stay here. He looked at me, looked down at himself, and he said, you ain't going nowhere. Sit down.
He's a changed man now.
I sat down, and I knew he was changed. At that moment, I knew he would kill me just like he killed that woman right there. And he would probably enjoy it because he looked like he had.
He's in a whole different state of mind at this time.
Yep. I mean, I've heard that for some people doing that is like a power trip, the ultimate power trip. Okay? It empowers them. I can understand that by what I saw after that. So he went to the back and he brought Pat up, and he told Pat, don't let him go nowhere. Stay here with him. And then he left. And he went back to where Donald was, and it wasn't long before we heard the same sounds coming from the guy's room that were coming from Ann's room. And it was the same effect. I mean, I sit here and I talk to you about it, and I still see it in my mind as if it was yesterday. I mean, it's something I'll never forget, okay? It's taken me a long, long, long time. I'm not going to say... I try very, very, very hard not to say anything that trivializes what their lives meant.
Of course.
Okay? Because there's value to human life. I'm trying to remember. I heard somebody once said, it was a convict I knew or something. And he made a statement one time, and he said, sometimes people just need killing. I'm sorry, it's the character from Sling Blade, Carl. And he said, sometimes people just need killing.
Oh.
I've never been able to think along those patterns, but I think it's because of what I went through that night. I don't think like you talked about the other side of the felony murder rule, right? There's another side to it that's not considered. And you were talking, when we were talking earlier this evening about the police and this persona that they put out. And they're more than happy when we stick our face out there and we say, oh yeah, I'm changed and this, that, and the other thing, and it helps them.
Right.
But they're never considering that at the onset, right?
No.
They do so to a certain extent now because they have the new juvenile laws in place, especially where murder is concerned. Okay. I wasn't a benefactor of it because they drug it out enough that I got denied at every turn, but they did eventually parole me because of it. Okay. But what we did that night, I'll always be responsible for. That was the first thing I had to come to grips with. Sometimes I say it was almost a blessing to get that life sentence the way I did. Because I've seen guys go through 30, 40 years in prison and they've convinced themselves that they didn't do what they did.
Right.
And let's face it, you've met guys like that. They're basically out of their minds.
I absolutely have. And I in my line of work, the criminal case reviews, I get reached out by these women, family members who want me to review these cases, and these are some of the questions I ask is how convinced that he is innocent are you, or has he just, because that's what I try to get people to understand. We're in there for years upon years upon decades, and all we have is time to think. And like you say, people will mold their stories around the loopholes to claim their innocence.
Right.
And then they'll actually believe it in their mind. And once you believe something in your mind, then you can convince the world of it because you believe it. So you're going to be convincing.
Right.
And they'll take these family members and these women that they meet, and they'll spend thousands of dollars on them just to be found that no, everything that they said was a lie, so. And I get it, they become mad, and it's like I explained to them, it's not his fault.
No, the time does that to you.
It's unexplainable.
It is.
To try to explain how that experience can warp your mind.
You have to fight against it.
Every day you have to.
I still remember because I went through the Corrections Transition Program, the CTP, at Everglades Correctional Institution. I was one of the few cases where I was there for 12 years. It's supposed to be a transition program where you go for about 2 years,
mm-hmm.
and then they parole you out. I was one of those off cases where I ended up in there, but probably I'd been there about maybe 3 years, I think it was, and I came as close to a total breakdown as you can come in life. I mean, I remember it well. I thought I was going to lose my mind because I'd been there for that amount of time and seen guys come and go, getting paroled and everything else. They set me off 5 more years because they could do that because my parole date was so far out there at the time. It was like 2043. And it's like, no matter how hard you try, the reality is like a hammer to your head. It's telling you, look, man, this is what it is. You need to face up to these facts. Don't dream. Don't look ahead.
Right.
You've been doing this. Keep doing this because
Right.
That's what's gotten you through each and every day.
Right.
Don't change your routine up on me. You're driving me nuts doing this. That's what you're saying to yourself.
This is exactly what you're saying to yourself.
And it's like,
keep it together, T.
Yeah,
keep it together, man.
Because that routine's what makes life manageable.
Right.
It works that way. Get up in the morning, man. Line up at the door. Go get that chow. Come back. Have that cup of coffee. Go through count time. Go to your work assignment or go to rec. You know what I mean? That routine every day grabs a hold of you. It becomes so comfortable. It's like a jacket that you just wrap around you.
You bid to it.
Yeah, and you just say, hey, you know what? This is comfortable enough. I can just do this. You turn your brain off and you just go through life like that. And then somebody comes to you and they say, you know what? I think you can get out. What do you mean I can get out? These people up here are telling me I'm never getting out. And you're saying I can get out? Are you crazy? This is Dr. Sharon. She's helped over 500 guys get out of there under that program. She stuck her neck out so many times for guys that have just abused it. I know of 4 of them that just went back. One of them's a 3-time offender. Just gave it up again and went back in after she put her neck out for him. But she still keeps doing it. And seeing that person do that's what helped me keep my sanity. Because she believed so much more in me than I ever did in myself, that she brought me up to her level instead of somebody knocking me back down to the one I was at. Thank God for people like that in life. I can't say I owe her, because when I say I owe her, she says, you don't owe me anything. What you need to do is owe yourself.
This is what I just told Eddie yesterday, because it's like Eddie says, his loyalties to the program. And it's like I tell him, no, Eddie, your loyalty is to yourself.
That's right.
Your loyalty is to yourself. And what I mean by that is you remain loyal to yourself. And when you're loyal to yourself, then that allows you to remain loyal to those who are loyal to you.
That's right.
But if you're loyal to somebody, that means that when they become disloyal to you, you're still going to give your loyalty to this entity. Mm-hmm. Because you're in your mind, you're telling yourself, I'm loyal to this. And no, you are loyal to yourself. And if this entity that you are loyal to then becomes disloyal to you, it starts moving in a fashion that you don't agree with, then that's where you can cut your loyalty out. Like you agreed to a burglary. You didn't agree to a murder.
Right.
You see what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. And that is the line that I try to get kids to understand, because all of us are like that. We'll allow ourselves to cross our own lines that we draw in the sand because we're allowing other people to pull us across.
Right. Well, that's the influence.
Right.
Like I said, when I was younger, I was hanging out with the ex-Vietnam vets. And as I look back, every single one of them were screwed up. These guys were over in another country, and the things that I heard about them killing people and other stuff that they did every day, I mean, that was some nasty stuff.
It's bad times, man.
And they didn't take care of them when they came back here.
Of course not.
They gave them a pension check, and they said, you know what? Here you go. Here's your apartment. And all they're doing is drinking beer, getting high, and hanging out every day. So if a young kid comes along, hey, you know what? They're more than happy to disseminate the information they got. And it's like that in life. The kids will, if they're not getting it at home, they will gravitate to whoever will give it to them. And I'm talking across a lot of borders that people don't want to talk about. I'm talking about these molesters out there that take advantage of kids every day. Okay? Dope dealers that take advantage of kids every day. It almost sounds stupid, right? But what was Nancy Reagan's slogan?
Just say no.
Just say no. Parents need to teach their kids to just say no, but to do it in such a way as you're not being overbearing and saying you do this or. Because when you say do this or and you put consequences on it, most teenagers are going to just rebel against that and do the exact thing that you say don't do. I know I was like that, and I know a lot of kids that were like that. We don't need an overbearing authority figure. What we need are parents that love us and care about us and want to see the best interests in our life. And the way to do that is to be who you say you want me to be and not tell me to be who you want me to be. Because there's a fine line in that. My stepfather would always say, do this, don't do that.
Right.
And yet he was doing the exact same things he was telling me not to do.
Dad.
Hello. Okay? We have to be consistent. Man, kids are watching and absorbing. It's kind of funny. I got 3 kittens in my house right now. They're always sitting and watching me. And I don't think them kittens are any different than kids. Because what they're doing is they're absorbing. Okay? They're absorbing everything that's going on around them every day.
Mirroring neurons.
Yeah.
That's what they are.
They're learning in the process.
It's how life works. Because the child instinctively knows that it knows nothing. and that it instinctively knows. That's what these mirroring neurons are, is to train the untrained brain on how to function by watching more experienced beings out doing it.
Right.
So that's that the kid will just sit there and watch you like this here. And you think that the kid is dumb and just watching you, but the kid is processing. That brain is just moving. You know what I mean?
There's a guy that I don't exactly agree with everything he says. His name is Dr. James Dobson. He started what was called Focus on the Family. He has had a book out years ago. It was called The Strong-Willed Child. What he says in that book that I agree with is that we will get the building blocks for everything that we believe in by the time we are 5 years old. Once we're 5, it's harder, right?
Mm-hmm.
Dr. Sheeran says it's about nurturing and what is it? Nurturing. It's kind of weird. This goes into a thing called Maslow's theory of hierarchy and needs. Okay, there's levels of what we need. All right, the basic level is food, clothing, shelter. Okay, but as we go up this hierarchy, in his hierarchy, our needs are being met. The top part of it is called self-actualization. Now, Maslow himself said that he only knew that one man in existence that he ever believed self-actualized, and I think he said that was Einstein, I think. Don't quote me on that. But the thing is that when you start thinking along these tiers, if I'm not having one of these tiers met, I'm going to go find it somewhere.
Right.
That's why you get so much homelessness. And from being a homeless person, it's habitual, like anything else in this life. I didn't start out thinking, oh, I'm going to live on the streets.
Right.
I started out thinking, I don't want to go home. I don't want to face the consequences of being late. I don't want to hear my stepfather ragging on me and all this other crap, and my mother sitting in the background letting him do what he does and not sticking up for me. So I would just rather not go home. And those times became longer and longer and longer until I was staying away for weeks. I was stealing out of stores. And every once in a while, somebody felt sorry for me and they would give me something to eat. You know, you talk about burglary. It was easier for me to get somebody to feel sorry for me. They would let me in their house. While they were making the food, I was scoping the place out. I knew what valuable stuff was. A ring here or a watch there or something like that. Right down to the pawn shop. You know? But these were the habits that I formed over time. The habits you form over time become what controls you. So if you work with the kids and just show a little patience and kindness and love and be a solid role model from the time they're born up through that time before they're 5. Because see, 5 is what? That's getting out now. Now we're taking them to school. They're getting into the outer environment. They're taking in even more stuff, right? So now they're not so much focused on the home life as they're focused on all this other stuff that's out there. So you need to solidify the home before they're 5. And it has to be that place that whenever they think about it, it's the place they want to return to. Instead of, in my case, it became the place I didn't want to go. See? Them little kittens in my house, if they grow up in my house and I open the door up and let them out, where are they going to come back to?
Yeah, they're going to know where to come to.
That's right.
Unless you beat them.
No. I'll spank their butt if they poop on my bed again. But I got them potty trained now.
So, I mean, after it was over, what happened? You guys are just standing in the house. You have 2 deceased individuals in the house.
So they covered up the bodies with sheets. We basically started going through the house and taking stuff. They had a Cadillac Brougham in the garage.
Nobody went and checked on the bodies to see if they were still.
They were dead.
They were dead.
They had them covered with sheets, but there was blood
soaking the sheets.
Yeah, it was. We went into those rooms, okay, because we were looking for stuff. She actually had 2 pistols right there in the drawer next to her bed. So a 32 and a 22.
Did her no good.
Nope, none whatsoever. You know,
Mm.
but the thing was, we got everything together. Used their car, used Eddie's car, put whatever we could in them, and left.
Mm.
Pat and Eddie, Pat and Eddie went out the back door. Me and Donald went out the front door. They didn't lock the back door. That's later on I found out that's how the neighbors, somebody from where these people worked at, called in and said they didn't show up, neither one of them. They went checking the house. When they went to the back, the door was wide open. They walked in and found the bodies. The very next day. We took the cars out to the other side of town where Eddie's car died at, his Toyota. So we went through a bunch of crap. They took the Cadillac, took the stuff back to Eddie's apartment, came back out. I'm trying to remember. I think Donald stayed at the apartment. Eddie came back out and he got me and Pat. I think that's what it was. It's hard to remember those details because it was like,
But what's going through you? I mean,
I want to get away.
is this on your head as
Yeah, I'm
far
scared
as
to death.
that these bodies are still there and
Yeah, I'm scared to death. I'm like in shock
You don't
because
know
it's
what to
like,
do.
no, all I can think about is go home. Just go home. Go to where your familiar territory is. Like I said, you teach that kid that home is safe. To me, Rochester was safe. Those streets were safe because I knew them. I knew
Right.
them like the back of my hand.
You're just trying to get to a comfort zone.
That's it. Jacksonville is not it. I want to get out of there, which is what I did the next morning. Pat and I got on a Greyhound bus, and we left and went to Rochester. Donald said he wanted to
Is
stay.
this already in the news by this time?
I don't think by the time we left, but Eddie sent his landlord to get his car, and it was a cemetery area. His was on this side, and he had parked the Cadillac on this other side because we took like a taxi back to his place. And when he sent his landlord after his car, his landlord was going by the spot where the Cadillac was at, and they'd already found the Cadillac. So the cops were all over this Cadillac. When he got home, he had dropped Eddie's car off, was watching the news, and they had the $1,000 reward for information leading to.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so that was on there. And this guy said, hey, wait a minute. His car was there. He called in. He got the $1,000. And Eddie was something else because he went right in and gave a videotape statement and a written statement saying that Pat and I had called him from that house and said there was a party going on. You need to come over. And he says when he got there, they were dead already.
Damn it, man.
In the end, he had pled guilty. Pat pled guilty first. He got 2 mandatory quarters running together. He was the youngest at 16. Eddie went to trial. Pat testified against him at trial. The third day of his trial, because of Pat's testimony, he pled guilty. But he was still facing the death penalty because he was 19 at the time. And they considered him the ringleader by then. They violated the rules and put Eddie, me, and Donald almost together.
Yeah, somebody going upstairs.
Okay, so almost together, and Eddie was begging us to take our deal so that they wouldn't give him the death penalty. They ended up giving him 2 mandatory 25-year life sentences running consecutive, which meant it would be 50 years before he would be eligible for parole. 50 years. Donald got 2 mandatory quarters running together or concurrent, and a 5-year charge for burglary running consecutive to that. So that means, should he ever be paroled, then he'll have to first stay in for that 5-year sentence before he can get out. But the way it is now is if they parole you to that sentence, as long as you don't get a DR, you're getting out. And it's a 5-year sentence under the old system, okay? On 5 years, he'd do about 18 months and he would be out.
Mm-hmm.
But Pat and I left. We got on the Greyhound bus and went back to Rochester. All this crap happened. So next thing I know, and I mean, look, we're so paranoid during the bus ride because it's like a 30-hour bus ride with all the stops and everything. We got to a place called Geneva, New York. It was dark out, and it's a little hole in the wall spot off of Lake Geneva. And Pat and I had got out to get something to drink, and we were sitting under this little tiki hut thing. 4 cop cars came up and surrounded the bus that we were in.
While you're sitting at the tiki hut.
We were about 100 feet away from it when we saw this. Both of us were ready to bolt into the woods. But we sat there. We're like, no, if we run...
They're going to know, they're going to see you.
Exactly. So we sat there. Turns out somebody had been smoking pot on the bus, and the bus driver called the cops on them, so they came to get him.
Isn't that crazy?
But in our minds, they were there to get us.
Of course.
Yeah. All right. And life was like that for the next few days. And finally, man, I got so many people in trouble with the cops in the process. The worst one was a friend of mine, Bob Sexton. He's probably dead now. He had done time himself, like 17 years. He had a shotgun in his apartment that was unloaded but belonged to a friend of his when they came looking for me. So basically their deal with him was...
extortion.
Oh, yeah. Yeah,
out of the Chucky, gate, I already know.
You get Chucky to give himself up, and we won't send you back to prison for this gun.
That's right.
Okay? That's...
got caught with your hand in the cookie jar.
That's right. It's just crazy how that kind of stuff goes, but that's the system, right?
That's the system.
So basically it all comes down to this. 38 years and 1 day is what I did. I got a day after my 38th year hit. Donald's still there. Donald's 40 years now, going on 40 years. He had opportunity to get out as a juvenile offender. He was up for resentencing. Somebody told him that because one box wasn't checked on his plea agreement that he could beat it. So he told the judge, I don't want to do this right now. They set it aside. And I guess you know enough about the law that the evidence alone convicts him. That one check box don't mean crap. And now he can't get resentenced as a juvenile offender. He's stuck till the parole commission lets him out. Unfortunately, in 1990, Pat, at the age of 23, I think it was at a facility in South Florida. I'm trying to remember the name of it now. Dade Correctional. Dade. I think it was Dade. Guy ran in his cell and threw gasoline on him and set him on fire. Remember, Pat's labeled as the snitch out of the group because he testified against Eddie. The cops hit him with the fire extinguishers, but 85% to 90% of his body was burned. They said he looked bad when he walked out. He was like in shock, walked out the dorm, fell down in the grass outside the dorm. They hit him with the fire extinguishers, and the infection killed him. Eddie died of AIDS at the Rock in 1996. So that would make him, he was 19 in 83, 13 years, 32 years old.
You were locked up when you heard this, or you found this out since you've been out?
Well, it's kind of funny because I was at South Bay Correctional Facility after it opened up, 97. So about 98, I used to write to a niece of mine, and just on the heck of it, I said, hey, look, do me a favor, look these guys up. I said, just go 3 numbers up from mine and 3 numbers down. My number is 096318. So go 3 up and 3 down and see if you can find these guys. She found Donald, but she said, I can't find the other 2 guys. And then 2 weeks later, somebody from Tallahassee who saw in their database that she'd been inquiring about these 2 individuals sent her the information on them and told them what happened to these guys. And then I started meeting guys that had been there when this guy threw the gas on Pat. I don't even know how to tell you how that made me feel, because it was like, I mean, you've been there. It's you do that time and you just hope you're not the guy. You hope you're not around that corner.
Well, from the moment your door cracks, you're making sure you're not that guy.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? You get up, you lace your boots up, you strap up, you do whatever.
Yeah.
You're conscious of everything that's going on around you. You're making sure that you don't bump anybody. You just
Yep.
every action that you do through the day is to make sure that it's not something that can get you killed.
That's right. And it's an awareness that, you remember we were talking earlier about getting out here, and this just being a larger version of that.
Right.
But that's because of the mentality that we learned in there.
Right.
Okay. And I think the better part of that is the awareness of life that causes me to appreciate the little things. Getting up in the morning in my own place, okay, feeding the cats, making a pot of coffee, you know what I mean? Sometimes I take a shower. Usually I take it the night before, but sometimes I miss it because I'm so dang tired from work. I say, heck with it, throw an extra blanket on the bed and crash. I'll wash it tomorrow.
Right. Yeah.
But then I go sit outside in my patio, man. I got a umbrella, 3-tier umbrella thing that's outside, and I got Christmas lights that are still on it, and a lamp that I found and I fixed up. It's a brass lamp. It's a nice lamp, right? Somebody threw it out. I took it and I cleaned it up and everything, and I got it hanging there, and it stays on all night long with those lights. And I just sit underneath that thing first thing in the morning, smoke a cigarette, have that cup of coffee. I'm in that quiet yard. You saw my yard today. You know what I mean? And it's,
People don't understand that. I get up in the morning because I wake up 4 or 5 o'clock. I don't have no alarms.
right. Don't need them.
Yeah, it's even. I'm 7 years.
The
home
door's
now.
still popping whether you're there or not.
Right.
Okay.
And it'll be that way till the day I die. You
Right.
know what I mean? I will go back to sleep, but 4 or 5 o'clock, my eyes open.
Right.
So I'll get up, I'll make my coffee, and I'll just go sit out in the back there. And I'll sit out there until the birds start singing. And it's people just don't understand that I can't be inside anymore. I have to. Even sitting here, I'll start. I got to get out.
Right.
And
it's a blessing being able to go out there and do that, though.
Even as limited as it is, you still have the ability to go outside.
Yeah.
That's at Miami FCI we had porches. And you'd have the dorm, but then you had a porch that actually had a gate that would lock, but you could sit out on the porch with tables. Man, we'd be out on that porch all day long because I wasn't a TV watcher.
Right.
So we'd be out on the porch just from the morning all the way till night, playing dominoes, cards, pinochle. Yep. When the gate popped, we'd go out and come back, sit back, but the most precious thing for me in prison was silence. That's the most elusive treasure that you'll find in prison.
Because the noise is there always, even in the background.
Constant noise.
Yep.
And every once in a while, you may be able to get up in the morning and go out to the softball field and sit out on the bleachers, and catch a little bit of quietness, just a little bit of just what we're experiencing now.
Yep. Before
somebody else comes out there or, whatever else happens. But that calmness and peaceness is what I thrive for now.
Yeah.
I don't have TV. As you see, this is quiet in here.
Yep.
I really greatly respect that peace, man. And I don't want drama in my life. I don't want none of that stuff anymore, man, because I'm just tired of it. I'm tired of that. The craziness, the ignorance.
Yeah. Especially the ignorance. I mean, I do not miss that. You remember we were talking earlier about that respect between cellmates.
Right.
And it's like, there's people out here that are still disrespectful, Well,
let's talk about that for a second. Let's talk about how how did you cope with being incarcerated for how long?
38 years.
38 years to come out here and deal with disrespect out here, because it's a whole different world inside.
Well, see, the thing is, that's where the blessing of that corrections transition program comes in at, okay? Dr. Sharon's a lifelong criminal psychologist. She's worked with individuals like us all her life, okay? So she has a great understanding of it. That's why she took on the role that she has as the director of that program 27 years ago.
I would love to have her on the show.
Oh, man, what? Listen, Doc will take you up the road and down the road, okay? She knows her thing.
I let her analyze me.
And the thing is that, okay, so like, you know how they used to call the left and the right, and they would call them the bleeding hearts?
Yes.
Okay, so she would be considered a bleeding heart.
Okay.
Because
bleeding heart liberal.
Yeah, well, her rule in life is that everybody, I mean, even you and me, right, as dudes that did time, we learned there's a line you draw, right? The rapists and the baby killers, they're at the low rung of the ladder, right?
Any kind of deviant shit.
Right.
You know what I mean? If you have a deviant mind, you're gunning women down.
Right, exactly.
Doing any kind of crazy stuff. Yeah.
That's the low rung, you know?
Yeah.
Me, I can walk around in prison with my head up, right? I got 2 counts of murder on me, man.
Right.
Don't fuck with me. You know what I mean? That's the persona you learn to put on, right? You ain't even got to say it.
Right.
Because dudes don't never want to find out whether you actually did that or not.
Right.
They're not willing to, well, there's one every once in a while, but most dudes are not willing to step over that line. Dudes talk about that, right? So in this program, what Doc tells guys is, I understand that you had these tools that helped you to get from this part of your life to this part of your life. But guess what? This is where your life is going. You need to envision that, and you need to embrace it. And in the process of embracing it, you need to recognize what you can keep and what you need to discard. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to have you take these classes that are going to give you the tools that you need, so that when you step out there, okay, you may not have been out there for 35, 40, 45 years, but your mind's going to be on the process. Now, that's what Tampa's the best for, though, okay? From any other town in this whole state, is that there is a system set up, is that we leave Everglades once we're paroled, and we're paroled to no community outreach for a year. They already have 6 halfway houses dedicated to just guys from our program, and he's building more right now, okay? They know what we need, and it's all our guys. So just like when I went into that program in 2009, I was taught that first I'll take classes, then I'll become what's called a co-facilitator. I'll take the class and learn how to give the class at the same time I'm taking it.
Right.
And then I become the facilitator who teaches the class.
That's exactly right.
Okay? And it's like that at Noah's house. I come out as a fresh guy just getting out after all those years, and there's a guy there that I'll know, like my friend Taylor. Taylor said, hey, dog, what's up? This is what you need to know. Takes me through the steps. And it's like that for every guy from our program that gets out. Somebody's there to help him.
That's right.
Along the way.
That's what we're building here at Coming Home Coalition with Ink to Ink. So that is the right way to do it.
Yeah.
Because like the issue that I'm seeing out in Pasco County is there's no leadership out there when it comes to reentry. You got these organizations that are just really kind of just sitting around, just waiting on a phone call for somebody to call them and say, you know, hey, I'm sending a guy over to you. There's nothing in place to strategize returning citizens to be put in a place that they can then facilitate their own programs in a sense.
Yeah.
And my whole aspect that I'm trying to push is the fact that you guys need to get out of our way. Yeah. Let us come in here and handle our own as we're coming out.
That's right.
Because nobody is going to understand how to handle us.
Like
nobody
we do.
Exactly. Nobody could handle me coming out other than me.
Yeah.
And that's what I'm trying to get this this county to understand is that they're thinking that because Pasco County took over the jails, they took over all the reentry, so everything is now being formed by the county. So you're going to have a government ran reentry program. And I cut the guy off, and I'm like, that'll never work. It don't matter how much money you put into it. It don't matter how much effort you put into it. It will not work, because I will never trust a government entity to sit here and think that they can rehabilitate me.
That's right.
No matter how bad I want to be rehabilitated, I would never trust the same lion that bit me.
Yep.
Who would?
No.
So it will never, never work that way. And that's where Coming Home Coalition comes in to know, I mean,
and we're their biggest assets. Okay. It's not just that we've been there, done that. All right. What I'm saying is this. I'm convinced. It's not just convinced that it sucks being in prison, because it sucks being in prison.
Mm-hmm.
The normal person, if they had to go through for a week what we went through day after day, month after month, year after year,
20 minutes.
Right. They would snap. Okay. It's not just that, though. That's not what deters me from going back.
Right.
I have this appreciation for life now.
Amen.
And that's what I want everybody out there to understand. Don't give up your appreciation for life. Okay.
Amen.
And I want to take one step back here. If there's anybody out there that's listening to us right now, and you're in this county, Hillsborough, and you have a loved one that's about to get out of prison or incarceration, understand that there are tools in place. What he's talking about, Pasco County, Hillsborough County does have in place. All you have to do is go see one of the resource officers at the Hillsborough County Jail. They will set them up with free medical coverage for a year and food stamps for at least 6 months to a year, depending on when you get a job and how much you make it. There's about a 6-month assessment period on that, on the SNAP program. But they can get that. There's halfway houses and programs all over this county that will accept individuals. If you want to help them, then Google that. Look for that. And you'll find there's a lot of them. Now, I'm saying this because he's right about a lot of other counties with these programs and this government-run crap, okay? It's a bureaucracy. It always comes down to the bureaucracy and how they run these things. And we understand it enough from being in there to know that it doesn't work. Even the prisons they have now in the state of Florida that they call incentivized, okay? They're not all they're cracked up to be.
No, they never are. It's a public hoax.
Well, I mean, okay, so in anything, I got to say this. It comes down to the individual. You said, how did I do all that time? And then come out here. I came to a point where I said, I got to do give and take. I don't like it, but I got to do give and take. Because this is what I want. Now, what do I got to give and what do I got to take to get from this point to this point? Okay? I had to come to a point where I said, it doesn't matter what anybody else thinks about me. I was a security orderly for classification, the colonel, and the wardens for the last 3 years I was in. I had the most respected position or wanted position where I worked in the visiting park, the security hall, admin, and all that.
Big money jobs.
Okay. All right. In this case, it's the hustle.
Right.
Okay. But one thing they knew about this kid, there wasn't no dope coming in that institution, wasn't no illegal activity coming around that spot. Okay. They had their allowances. There's always the acceptable hustle. You can do that. But they don't want this done. You know how the unwritten rules are, right? The convict code. They go by that too. Because it makes their life easier. It's the give and the take. When you learn the give and the take, life becomes much easier. I got faith in God. I believe in God. That's the only way I kept my sanity. I told you earlier, I almost lost it in there, man. Man, I was going to bed crying, getting up laughing, and doing a bunch of the both in-betweens.
Hell, I do all that now.
But I mean, I knew I was losing my mind.
Yeah.
It was only my faith in God that said, you haven't brought me through all this for nothing.
That's right.
There's got to be a purpose in all of this. Those people's lives had to matter, but my life matters also, and somebody else's life matters who my story will help in some way or another. And I don't know how, because we all interpret things differently. We're not all on the same scale, right? But even somebody looking at me right now saying, man, this dude did 38 years and yet he's sitting there with Thomas talking right now. And my life's great. It's not great, but it's great.
It's great.
Things come at you, man. My car is down right now. My Mustang. But you know what? I'm riding my bike 11 miles to work and riding home every day 11 miles. And you know what? I love it. I take my time. Well, I got to hurry a little to work.
Yeah.
But if I take my time coming home, man, I'm enjoying everything I'm seeing, just like that place we went to eat. I passed by there every day. That's how I knew where we were going when you turned down in there. So I passed by that place every day.
So I'm going to go get a good nacho.
Yo.
Nacho.
Not your ordinary nacho.
Not your ordinary nacho. And they're nachos.
Yes. But the thing is that it's the mentality of the individual. In my case,
that's right.
I finally said, I got to believe in it, even though I can't put my hand on it. At my last hearing,
that's right.
They took 8 years off my parole date, bro, and set me ineffective. I had to wait 9 weeks for that effective. Normally, it's only like 2 weeks and a guy gets out. I had to wait 9 weeks for that effective date to get there. It was the happiest and the roughest time I ever did in prison.
I can imagine.
Because I knew I was finally getting out, but my brain wasn't processing in it.
Well, well, that's the thing is that's the closest to the gate that you've been.
Oh my God, what? They gave me, my whole time I was close custody. I'd been out the gate a couple of times early on because they used to trust us like that back in the day. But because of some idiots, and mostly because DOC wanted control of the system, they changed all that up.
Explain to the listener what closed custody is.
Okay, so now you have 4 levels of custody. When I first came in, there was only 3 levels of custody. You had close, medium, and minimum. Now they have what's called community custody. You can't go to work release or any type of place outside of a facility unless you have community custody now. It used to be minimum. Close custody means, and they have housing order status, but close custody basically means I have to stay in the institution and I'm limited on any of the jobs or things that I can do in there because I can't be trusted.
Yeah, you'll never go outside the gate.
Never. And I practically never did.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. It was early on, like I said, they trusted me a couple of times, but then after that, especially after 1990 and the Dilbeck crap, they locked it down, bro. So literally, I was minimum custody for the last 6 weeks I was in. I'd never been that low. I'd never been medium. They dropped me from close to minimum just because of the time frame. And they wouldn't even let me step outside the gate with that. You had to have the gate pass from the colonel. And that was my boss, the guy I'd been working for. And I told him, I just want to be able to go out there. Let me go out and clean up the front. No, we can't go through all that and blah, blah, blah. I was like, wow, really? All this time I've been doing all this hard work. And I kept that place spick and span, bro. Ain't nobody do a floor like I do a floor, bro. Nobody. Okay? That's one of the things they loved about me. When you walked in that visiting park, that sucker shined like a mirror.
People love the good shiny floor, man.
Yep.
People love a good shiny floor. So we're gonna wrap up here, man, and I want to bring you back to talk about part 2 and you going to prison now for life.
Yeah.
At 18 years old.
18 years old, man. Yep.
So I mean that's a whole different story in itself. But do you remember what what are the victims' names?
Charles and Ann.
Charles and Ann.
Yep. No, I've never let myself forget that. And they'll never be forgotten. There was an old convict named Doug McCrae. He's probably never going to get out. I believe he shot his wife and her lover, I think it was. Both in the head. But he made a statement back in 2009 that's always stuck with me. And he said that whatever you do in life, You need to, number one, remember the names of the victims of your crime, because if you deviate from that, then you're deviating from reality.
You're not an honorable person.
And two is that you honor the memory of those victims by remembering them like that. And then you always put their names to what you're doing, because that makes them worthwhile. He says, because to not do so means that they didn't mean anything. And don't nobody want to hear that. Because that's to say that their life doesn't have any meaning. And I'm, for one, would have to agree with him, because I don't want anybody telling me that my life doesn't have meaning. Not after all I've been through. And that's what I'm going to tell each and everybody that I ever meet again. Just like that old Spanish couple I met the other day. To be able to help them the way that I did was just like, it made me feel good, because I got them home, man. They were lost. They were less than a mile from their house, and yet they were lost. I know how that feels, you know? And wasn't anybody else paying attention to them. And they couldn't communicate with anybody because they're Spanish. They're Cuban. They don't speak English.
Yeah.
I know what that feels like. So to put the names to the victims is only right.
Absolutely. And that's why I wanted to bring their names forward tonight. Rest in peace, Charles and Ann. And
Amen.
Forgiveness comes in big prices sometimes, but it's always a necessity for us to move on, move forward, and understand. There's always the topic of, do murderers deserve to get out of prison? And for me, it's always a yes, because I understand what prison is, and
At least once, given one opportunity.
well, absolutely. I mean, it's I understand what prison is, for one, and for two, you can do a lot more to honor those individuals out here
Exactly.
than you can be rotting away in a
Right.
cage.
I'm doing nobody any good sitting in there. I'm just wasting taxpayers' money after a certain amount of time.
Right. And after you burn the hand so long, it just turns into a crisp and it doesn't hurt anymore.
That's right.
You know what I mean?
And then you don't care.
Then you don't care.
We've met guys like that. They don't
And
care
then
if they ever get out.
and then that's when they want to release you, is when you don't care.
Right. Old Brooks in the
Brooks.
Shawshank Redemption. You know what I mean?
Well, Chuck, thank you so much for coming and opening yourself
Thank
the way
you, brother.
that you did.
I appreciate you, man.
Absolutely, man.
Hey, we got this.
These are heartfelt stories.
Yo.
These aren't, to boast about crimes. It's not to
not.
brag about.
No.
It's for to understand, because our children are out here killing people on the drop of a dime. There's no thought process in it. There's no value in life. We're losing the morale of this country. It's these stories that I produce and bring forward are not only very traumatic for us, because it brings back an experience in our life that opens doors to guilt, to depression, to a lot of trauma in our lives. So I respect that holistically, for anybody to open their heart and expose a lot of pain in their life for lessons learned. So this is why we do it, and I honor the men that come and talk about it, because it's about saving our children's lives, and also helping parents to recognize signs that their children are starting to go awry.
That's right.
And I'm a firm believer, like we go back, before you start looking at your child, the parent needs to look at themselves.
That's right.
If you see that your children are starting to go awry, you need to get with your spouse and say that this is what's going on. What are we doing? Are we being hypocrites? Are we chastising our children for the same thing that our children are seeing us doing? Is really coming into ownership, because these are the issues.
You got to be real with them. You got to be real with them. If you ain't 100% real with them, they're going to sniff it out and they're going to buck against it, man.
Absolutely. So with that, guys, we love you. There will be a part 2 coming up soon.
Yep.
But until then, you guys take care of yourself. Don't get caught up in this dilemma, and be your best self, man. We need love out there. We need good people. We need leadership in our communities. We the people, power to the people. It's about uniting our communities, bringing us together.
Yep.
This is why I will not commit another crime against my people. I will never sell another drug to nobody, because I care about my American citizens. I care about humanity. And I now understand that even though that I may have not been directly affected or guilty of certain crimes. I still had a thought process and a decision that I could have just simply said no, and
That's
things
right.
would have been different. So
A whole lot different.
you guys take care, stay blessed. We out.